Hey everybody, it's Ken Pooch Van Druten here along with you, along with Chris Rabold. How you doing today,
What's up,
Chris?
guys? I'm all right.
Yeah?
I'm all right. Quarantining, you
Quarantining,
know?
as we do. I love
Yeah.
that behind you there's more props. Like there keeps coming.
Yeah. I'm working on my set.
I love
Whenever
it.
we actually do something with the console, I'm going to have to move back to where my actual shit sits.
You know
But
what?
yeah.
It's so funny because I was, all of my gear, I own an SD7 and my gear is sitting in Detroit. And I'm trying to
hmm
figure out, like, the minute that they're going to let us out of the house, I'm going to drive to Detroit and drag it back to my house here, so that maybe I
I
can
hear
do
you.
some console stuff.
Yep. Yep.
Hey, before we get started, I just want to real quick, we hope that you guys are enjoying this whole headphone giveaway thing. Super stoked about it. Roxanne at Audio Technica hooked us up and just said, listen, hey, let's give you, some headphones to give away, and so we're gonna do that every week, and I think that is really cool. But along with that, it's funny, we talk about like literally, no bullshit. Like Chris and I use M50s. I've used them for years. They are my favorite headphone, mainly because they have kind of a low end thing that other headphones don't have. Like their low end to me is like true. I find that if I listen in these phones and then put it in a PA, it's pretty close, which is unusual for a pair of headphones. But anyway, by having them for so many years, the ear cushions on them get all messed up. I don't know if you can see that, but like this is my old ear cushion on my set of M50s, and this company, Wicked Cushions, makes headphone cushions that you can replace them with. So if you see on my M50s, you can see I got brand new little black cushions, and so now this pair of M50s is a new pair of M50s. So anyway, shout out to Wicked Cushions. We appreciate you. And we hope you guys are digging the headphone giveaway. We'll do that. We'll give one pair a week, away to you guys. So look out for that. Well, what do you want to talk about today, Chris?
Well, we're juggling between a few. Let's do spoiler alert, guys. We do two of these at a time, so it's a back-to-back combo.
I think they know that just because of the shirts that we wear, right?
Absolutely.
Which, by the way, I just want to point out that I'm like, because I'm at home and like wearing the same pajama pants for 3 days in a row, I'm like, I guess I should change my shirt so it at least looks like I've changed my shirt.
Yeah, absolutely. I need to shave. I actually showered today, so I'm pretty proud
Did
of
you? All
myself.
right, good for you.
Yeah,
Congratulations.
great, Chris. Good job. Let's do the business C1 first. Fuck it.
Okay, cool.
You know what I
So
mean?
absolutely. So business
Yes.
stuff. We are really enjoying, by the way, that you guys are commenting on the videos and you're commenting on our social media and kind of giving us a little bit of feedback. We're enjoying that. A couple of people have asked about like handling the business side of this and how is it negotiating salary, and those kind of questions are coming up a bunch. Yeah, so I just did a thing on the Instagram for Rupert Neve where I spoke a little bit about salary negotiation, and I think it's an important thing, right? Like, it's something that a lot of people don't talk about. Like, what do you do when a manager of a band calls you and starts talking to you about how much money you want to charge? It's a hard
Right.
discussion, right? Like,
Yeah.
give us a little idea, Chris, like how does that go for you? How does that conversation happen for you?
Yeah. And you're right. It's no fun. It's mission critical. You got pretty much one shot or one series of shots within that shot to get it right. And then you're locked into that for a while.
Yep.
So you got to really wade ever so carefully because two things. One, you don't want to end up essentially with a resentment towards your client, whoever is representing that client, your client in that conversation. And you don't want to end up pissed at yourself either, where you sold yourself short or you stood up a little too tall and acted like an ass. And you've kind of, so it's a very, very delicate, there's a fine line between how it works and screwing yourself. So yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the first part of this is you have to know what you're going to settle for, right?
Yeah.
So when you walk into this situation and the manager throws out a number that obviously is way below what you're asking for, there's kind of this weird moment where you have to say, well, listen, I'm thinking more along the lines of this. It's hard. It's like in that Rip or Neve thing I spoke about, there's things that like you definitely don't say. You don't say, well, when someone throws out a number at you that's like, really low, don't be offensive in that, well, that's ridiculous. That,
yeah.
If you start,
everyone's on their heels from the jump.
Totally. And by the way, the number one thing that you should know in any sort of salary negotiation with anybody is that they don't want to be there either.
No.
You know what I mean? It's like you in my mind, I always go, well, this guy has the leg up. He knows what he wants to, but he's like, I don't want to fucking discuss this either. This is not something that I'm really interested in talking about. I want to get out of this as fast as I can.
Totally.
So I always give them some sort of out, usually I say, in a first interaction with the manager, I almost never agree to anything. I almost always say like, hey man, can I think about it for a couple of days, or let me get back to you tomorrow. Let me think about this. And then what that allows me to do is get away from the situation, let him get away from the situation, him or her away from the situation. It takes the tension out of the moment, and allows me to counter with an email, which I find is usually better received. Like, the guy who's calling me or the girl that's calling me, the manager that's calling me and having that discussion, they usually don't want to have this interaction either. And so there's all this awkwardness, you saying, well, I don't know, I was thinking I wanted it to be more of this, and, and that kind of situation. By going to email, you take all that out of it. And I've had some success that way. Have you found that, or what's your, like, do you always, when it's that phone call, is that it? There's one phone call, or is there several?
No. And I'm realizing how deep of a topic this is right now. Because, well, first of all, I completely understand why you'd go that route, how you would move to the email, because in that initial banter, first of all, I know the call's coming. He or she knows the call's being made. So everyone's kind of got their script ready, yet we haven't written the script together. Totally. So you can end up talking all over each other, or someone doesn't, it can get a little squirrely in there, even if it's the most amicable ever of conversations. So I understand following it up, especially in an email, when you can be succinct, to the point, firm but polite. You can really box it up really well there. Here is my statement.
For sure.
What keeps going through my mind through all of this is that it is so situation dependent, which it's kind of lame to say, well, it depends, but it really does. And so now, and maybe what we'll circle back around to, I feel like this conversation as a whole is different depending on what level you're at.
100%. Yeah, absolutely.
Because the money numbers are different. Your power is different. The budgets everything is so incredibly different. So it really depends. Nowadays, one thing you'll know, if it's an existing client, you already, unless there's some new business manager or something. Yeah, and then let's talk about that, who we're talking to. For me, I've spoken to everyone from business managers, production managers, managers, day-to-day managers, the artist, the production manager, the tour manager. You know, I mean, that's 7 right there off the top of my head.
And each of them, and let me point out, each of them kind of is you handle in a different kind of a way, right?
You do, because it depends on your presentation with this person. If they have the artist ear, and if the artist is the kind of person that keeps track, some of them don't care, they don't know, but a lot of them do. You know, they know what's going on, and you don't want something to get back to the artist where, you know, you were a little aggressive or copped an attitude or this or that. Because even if that artist wants you, that will plant somewhere in the back of their head that was the deal. So you mentioned going in. One thing I always make a point of knowing, and I'll know the person, I'll be like, because so many times I hate the haggle of the negotiation. I hate if I say 100, you're going to say 80 and I'm going to say 90. Like, that's like some bullshit dating thing that we both like. It's like, I'll go in there, and if I know them well, I'll be like, look, this is what I feel comfortable with. This is the number, and this is the number. You know, if you don't, and from there, that's when you can either do things like, and if you're not comfortable with that, and you know, it's just not a thing you're able to do on a business level, I respect that, but I just want to be upfront with you. There it is. Or my tone might be different. It's just, it can go so many different ways. So I think it's just kind of knowing who you're dealing with going in. If that makes sense.
No, I think absolutely, and that makes a lot of sense. My salary negotiation has changed over the years, and the reason it's changed is I think reputation wise, people come at me now having searched for me and now know a little something about me and know people that I've worked for before them. And kind of have a guess of what my salary range is going to be already, right? Mm-hmm. So a lot of times recently, the salary stuff that they're quoting is super close to like what I, am expecting, if that makes sense. Whereas when I first started, and didn't have a reputation, what they were coming at me with was usually like a really low number because I didn't have a reputation, and those were the conversations where I had to say, well, listen, I think I'm worth more of this, whatever. But yeah, it is a harder situation. I actually don't like having a salary negotiation with a business manager. And the reason is that business manager, his or her whole goal in life is to be able to go back to the artist and tell them how much money he saved them.
Yeah, that's their win. That's their win.
That's their win, right? So oftentimes negotiating with a business manager is the worst case scenario. And I know you don't really have a choice in that, but just realize that in your own brain that's probably going to be the hardest guy to negotiate with, I think.
And if I can interject real quick, a couple things. That business manager, maybe they are entertainment, music business savvy.
Yes.
Maybe.
Yes.
They've done this with others, but by and large, they don't give a shit who Ken Pooch Van Druten is.
100%. They don't.
Some dude they've got to call. They also might not have reference, and this is a tough one. They might not have any reference at all what people make.
Right.
And I was getting ready to say like a PM or someone, they're going to have, if they work, there's so many variables, but if they work with other acts in the industry, they might have a knowledge of kind of roughly where it falls. But if they don't, and their eggs are only in that basket and of that artist, they've never seen anyone make more than what they've ever paid. So for you to come in and see what I mean? It can get really tricky, but you're right. The business manager is the person, like, they do not care.
They don't
by
care
and large who we are.
They don't care. They don't care. And they're the ones that get the win if they're able to go back and say, well, hey, I got your guy for, super cheap. So those are the guys. we didn't talk about this. The way that we do this, guys, just so you know, is this is totally off the cuff. This is Chris and I having a conversation. We don't plan what we're going to talk about, really. We just start talking. So before this, I didn't have any sort of conversation with Chris about where this was going to go. But so I don't want to put you in a weird position here, Chris, but I think that the question that a lot of guys want to know is so what is the average salary? Like, what do guys make out there? And that is, like, to me, the hardest question in the world. And here's the reason that I say that. Number one, there are guys out there right now that are taking gigs for way cheaper than they should. Yeah. Right? And that is their prerogative, and they can do whatever the hell they want, but you are only hurting the entire industry of independent contractor, front of house, and monitor engineers. I'm speaking to you guys mostly, the guys that are working for sound companies as a system engineer and that kind of thing. That's like negotiating a salary with in a regular position. I'm talking about independent contractors that have to negotiate a salary every single time. By you taking a job for $1,000 a week, you are, you're hurting yourself and you're hurting us brothers.
It's true.
So often I've thought about this and said, not that we should unionize, but something along those lines, in the sense of there should be some sort of range out there that people should be functioning under. But the problem is that when you're talking about a band that's touring around in a van and a U-Haul, right, versus an arena or a stadium mixer, the vastness of that is huge. So I'm not trying to put you on the spot for a number.
All good. Sure.
But speak to that a little bit.
Okay. And stop me and bring me back in line if I'm going the wrong way with this, because I'm going to try to steer clear of maybe actual numbers, but I think this might paint a picture.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you where I think it is the most kind of clear cut. Some of those band and trailer up through 1 truck, 2 truck, 3 trucks, that's where it's really hard.
Yep.
Because who knows? Like, I can tell you right now, a lot of the acts that we work for, our value is based on essentially what the going rate is versus who we are, or what our reputation is, or what our results have been within that upper tier. But by and large, there's a pretty defined window in there. Whatever it is, some of the mega stars out there, they will spill that in the dressing room in 3 days' time. You know what I mean? Like, it's not, they could oftentimes pay someone like you or I 5 times what we're asking, and it would be okay. You know what I'm saying?
Totally.
But
I always say, just real quick, the same thing that I always say to people is that most of the artists that, like, you and I work for could write us a life-changing check, and that would be like them going
problem.
to lunch. You know what I mean? So
right. No,
so yeah,
exactly.
keep going. But I'm just saying, it's like these are artists that are like,
Oh, totally. They got it. They absolutely have it. Yeah. And again, it goes into who we're negotiating, representing them, and we're both trying to win. And so anyway, I'll say this. I feel like I can think of it in my head. There's, let's say, for sort of an higher tier engineer, there's a window, I would say, of about $2,000 either way. Maybe you kind of know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
There's a maybe 3. And I know you're like me. Like, we talk. I have peers. It's, even though talking money is kind of tacky, you know what you kind of know what people are making, and that's part of how you determine your value, is know what the market value is. That's
a really important point. So without us talking about exactly how much money you guys out there should be communicating with your peers, kind of like what Chris and I do. If you have a bunch of your friends that are also front of house guys and monitor guys at the same level that you're at, you are the guys that are setting this precedent. You should be having conversations with yourselves saying, hey, listen, man, I took that last gig for, listen, I know talking about money and telling people what you make can get a little bit dodgy. Sometimes if you made some sort of deal where you made a bunch of money, and you're talking to a friend of yours and off the cuff, you're like, yeah, I'm making X amount of dollars. And there's this long pause.
Yeah.
That you kind of, showed your cards. But my point is, you should be having kind of at least conversations about the range of money, right? If nothing else. So sorry.
Yeah, I've had Nope, this is perfect. I had someone email me not too long ago, and they were asking me I don't even know that it was an engineer. I think it was like a tour manager from I don't know, these people probably play 1,000 seats every night or something like that. And I don't know. Like, I don't know. And I told that guy, I was like, look, I mean, we talked some sort of philosophical things about approaches and maybe some of what we're talking about here. But I told him, I'm like, who do you like at your level? Who are your peers? Who do you see at festivals? Who do you see playing at the same? And who do you like? Who do you think works for a decent organization? And I'll tell them, talk to those people. So I think knowing your worth is really important. One thing I wanted to say as well, I mentioned that, again, you and I can reference sort of where we are fortunate enough to be. And there's several $1,000s either way that are kind of what most guys are making around this thing, around at our spot in the industry, so to speak. But then you'll hear the stories, and the stories are, let's say, somewhere within that small area that I just mentioned, times 2.
Yes.
And those are often legacy guys that have been with, legacy mixers with legacy acts. They've been there for 30 years. You know what I mean?
Totally.
Or it can oftentimes also be the person that works for a very difficult artist and has been fired 3 times, not necessarily deservingly so, but because the artist is a maniac. Yep. And then the artist turns around, wants him back, and the guy says, I'm not coming back. So you hear these stories where, what I'm saying is there's a range, and then there are those outliers or just the bullshitters that have somehow they just have worked themselves into these, you know what I'm saying? So you got to be careful, not because I know there's people out there that make some of these insane totals, but I know there's oftentimes a backstory with it.
Absolutely. Yeah. I really do think that the best course of action is to have discussions with your peers about what is the range. Hey, I just got offered such and such a job. That might be a conversation that you might, get off the phone, that first phone call that I was talking about. You get off that phone call, and then the next couple of calls should be to whoever your friends are saying, hey, man, I just got offered, a pretty good gig, and, it's kind of a step up from what I'm doing. How much should I be charging? I don't even know, because you're doing yourself an injustice by not getting a feel for what the industry is, if that makes a sense. Because what your number for work might be way lower than what the standard of that industry is, or what the standard of that,
the
position is, So you should always be kind of checking yourself to make sure that you're not, underselling yourself.
I just thought of something. This is an aside. That's what we do. This was years ago, not doing the kind of acts that I'm doing now. And because I was also the PM on this thing. It was one of those deals a lot of guys do where you're like the tour manager and the front of house guy, production manager and the front of house guy. And I was that. And I knew what we paid people because that was part of my job. I also, this is to our point, I just through conversation, knew what other people were paying, not necessarily in the same genre, but on that level. So much of what we do is defined by trucks.
Totally.
You know, like that says it all. A 3-truck tour says it all. A 25-truck tour says it all. So I kind of knew what we were doing, where I'm monetarily for the people that work for us. Where I'm going with this was I needed a raise. It was my turn to get a raise. I worked for this band, and it was a salary position. So I have to keep in mind, okay, this is a great deal. I'm paid when I'm not working, not retainer. I'm paid full throughout. So there's a lot. Plus, there was all kinds of perks and stuff that went with it. I've never had it like this since. There's all these things that went with it, but I need a raise. How do I do this? So what I did is I took what we had paid the front of house engineer that preceded me, based on what I knew the going rate for someone at our level would be. Then I averaged how many weeks we toured for the past 10 years, wrote that number down, did the same thing for what a PM would get, then gave him a month at half pay. I created this scenario.
Wow, interesting.
It's not, although it might sound somewhat SAT question-ish right now. On paper, it was pretty simple. It was like, look, this is what we'd be paying for the two of me that are the one of that are the two versus the one of me.
Yeah.
And I came in with this number, and you know what? The security of knowing I had that work through them made me feel okay to go, here's that number, I'll take this. And it was slightly lower than, but the deal is I didn't have to hustle. I didn't have to find work. That to me was worth that difference that I made. I presented to management. This guy was a super hard ass who I really respected and really liked. And he just kind of looked at it and just said, you're right. And it was a big moment for me. I've never done anything as elaborate, nor do I have access to all these people. It's usually a phone call or an email now. I just happen to work in the same office as this person. So I did that, and I did it confidently, knowing I was citing numbers that were correct. So I felt good about it and then presented in that way. So that's just one example of knowing your worth and knowing kind of where the industry is. You know what I'm saying? That's
really great. And that is certainly, if you are that guy, like I started the same way. Everybody in that 1-truck, 2-truck place wants the front of house guy to be the production manager too, or wants you to be the tour manager too, or whatever. They want dual jobs. If you're in that place, doing your research like that is really a great idea, because do the math on that. Not only are you saving them salary wise, but you are saving them hotels, flights, maybe having to get another bus by eliminating a person. So all of that shit adds up. So don't undersell yourself when you're talking about doing 2 jobs. Obviously, you're not going to get the normal rate for a production manager and the normal rate for a front of house guy and combine those 2 things, and that's what you're going to get. Nobody's going to do that, because the whole point of having one guy doing that is to save them money. However, be realistic, like what you did. That was really cool. And come at them, with a number that says, hey, I'm saving you money. But I deserve this because I'm doing 2 jobs. Which, by the way,
keep in mind,
go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, go for it.
Which, by the way, I know that everybody does it and they want to combine it, and actually, from our perspective, it'll help us to make more money, that kind of stuff when you're first starting out. But I will just say that I feel like both jobs are not getting equally looked at in an equal way, in the sense that, if you were just the production manager, you would be super focused on a bunch of things that, or you were just the mixer, you would be super focused on a bunch of things. When you combine 2 jobs, I think that there's something that lacks in both of those jobs. I think that maybe the artist is not getting the best of you in both positions. So I really, I get it. Listen, I'm not the guy that's here to say, well, you shouldn't take that job. Absolutely, you should. And you should, go after making more money. But I just, from my experience and for years of doing it, being a production manager / front of house guy, I just felt like both jobs were not getting my best, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And I think there's a number, and this is where the conversation is such that what you're asking for, what your worth is, what your value is, what your position of power is, changes drastically up and down the food chain, depending on where you are. For instance, I can sit here right now and tell you fairly confidently how I go about things or my feelings on negotiating this and that. I worked for free when I was 19 years old. When the first tour I ever did, I worked for free. And even then, and so, you'll hear, don't work for free. Don't work for free unless you're 19 years old and you just kind of talk your way onto that bus. And
totally.
You know what I'm saying? Then fucking work for free. Because
absolutely.
You know what? Even at 19, it was my first tour. I knew if I kind of found myself, like, the industry just made sense to me. Like, and I have to remember that sometimes, because it's easy to sort of fall out of love with it when it becomes your norm. And I think that's what people are finding out a lot right now that we're stuck at home. Like, God damn, I miss that shit,
Yep.
And the industry just worked for me. It felt natural. I understood. And I mean the live world of touring. And I knew I was in the right place, and I knew that the money would come eventually, that if I just stuck it out, the money would come, and I think that's important to remember, be okay with less at times early on, knowing that you're going to fucking pound it and you're going to get there.
Totally.
So doing double dipping for less, than it's a pain in the ass, but you know what? Then don't aspire to double dip forever. Then get better. You know what I mean?
Totally. It's really interesting. So a guy who is a church mixer, but has done a fair amount of touring, who's a friend of mine, was telling me about a situation where he was mixing front of house and then was kind of asked to be the playback guy too, right? So he was doing some Pro Tools stuff from front of house, and a couple of his peers gave him a rash of shit about doing that for free, not asking for more money for being the playback guy. They basically, he showed up, they were paying him to be the front of house guy, and they also said, hey, listen, we need somebody to be the playback guy. Can you also do that? And he said, of course, yeah, no problem, I'll do it. And I told him, I said, well, that's bullshit. If your peers are giving you crap about you doing your job, and your job is to service a client, then I just don't think that's right. I mean, what's your feelings about that scenario?
My feelings would be, your friends don't know the situation.
Right.
You know what I mean? That whoever the naysayers, and some of that might be coming from a really good place from those. So people, that might be coming from a really good place from some people. But, we're talking so much about it depends.
Right.
You don't know. Maybe you agree to that, but you're thinking, all right, in 6 months though, I'm coming back around and ask for, or this can't what's the next step? Always be thinking what the next step is. So I understand that sentiment. I think it just depends on where you are, at what point in your career do you really need to be flexing super hard on what your own demands are,
It's hard, man. It's hard. Yeah, it's a slippery slope. There are 1,000 people waiting in the outside fringe of this to take your job.
And that's the truth, man. That is the honest to God truth. There's also something that I keep thinking about now. There's what our worth is, there's what our value is, and then there are other certain realities. I don't know if you're going to agree with me on this one, but I mean, there are good engineers, and then there are great engineers. I don't know that the difference between the two is going to sell any more tickets or not. I really don't. I do know that it comes down to how much does that artist / production / management team care about the artist? In other words, is it enough to just have passable audio, just a good enough show, or do you want to fucking kick ass and be that much better? And that's where that difference is. So, and I have said that in negotiations before, where I've said that. I'm like, look, you're not going to sell any more tickets by me asking for this extra rate because I think I'm worth it, but I'm worth it if I feel like I can confidently say that to them, you know. Yeah. And I'll only say that. I would only say that if I know the artist cares.
Yeah.
If I know the artist is totally checked out and barely, then I'm not, because you know what, the artist doesn't care.
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah.
I don't know. Does that sound controversial? Do you understand what I'm saying?
Absolutely not. No, I think that is absolutely the case. You know, I've had managers come at me with a really low super rate, and my answer to that, when it's obvious to me that they're not really going to budge. My answer to that is always, listen, man, you hire me for my experience. You hire me for when the shit hits the fan. If the shit doesn't hit the fan, hire that guy that will work for that low rate, because that guy is probably going to get as close to a result as I can get, as far as, you know, my mixes might be a little bit bigger, but just like what you said, it's not going to sell more tickets. But what you are hiring me for is when the PA takes a shit and it looks like we're not going to have a fucking show. I have had that experience before, and I know what I can do, and I bring to the table 30 years of experience that guy that you're paying that low rate is for. So, you know, there's all kinds of factors. You know what I mean? It's like
there are. I'm thinking about you right now. I'm thinking, you know, and they're paying for that. They're also paying for how you know to speak to an artist confidently, calmly, to instill confidence in, to, you know, there's so many aspects aside from moving the faders that they're paying for.
And
it's going to pay dividends for them if you are someone that instills confidence in the artist, because then that's just one less, you know, that's another wonderful little thing that exists in the camp that they don't have to worry about.
Oh, man. Yeah. Like, and let's be honest. Ultimately, a manager, that's what they're looking for. They're looking for somebody where they don't have to worry about the artist coming at them about sound. That's really just it. Like they want to be able to say, I've got the guy that's going to handle it all. I'm not going to have people wanting refunds. The artist is not going to come at me going, who the fuck, what is wrong with this front of house guy? You know, that's what he wants, right? That manager, that's what he wants. He wants to have a salary negotiation with us, and then he doesn't want to ever have to talk about sound again. I mean, that's really
how
the deal.
Great is it? Absolutely. How great is it when then down the road, let's say you have this, not contentious, but there's a little bit of back and forth. Let's say you get lucky, they give in. No, it's not get lucky. Let's say you agree to terms, right?
They agree to terms.
You move down the road, then you're out there, you're doing your thing. Guess what? Then you're excelling. Then suddenly, maybe in that camp, feedback has never been given to the artist or the management or whoever. That, man, it sounds really good. Next thing you know, you're that guy's bro.
Totally.
You know, there's my guy patting you on the back, and it's like, and it's all good, you know, and then it's all good, and that's kind of one of those like I told you sort of moments.
That's the thing, yeah. Well, that's the thing, you know. I always tell people, you know, getting into this, you have to have lots of skills, right? So you have to have skills about how to deal with people and how to talk to an artist, and all of those things are important. And I almost always say, those are almost more important than your skills. But the problem is that you still have to be really good too. You still have to deliver. So when you deliver and you're in that situation where all of a sudden, you know, people are talking about how good the sound is, then I mean, that dude's all of a sudden your buddy.
You know, one thing I thought about, is, you know, we're talking about knowing your worth, also knowing the market value. And we're basically saying, what's the average value of, you know, you elsewhere. There are also the other factors that need to come into play. And what I mean by those are, I mentioned the guy that's been fired 3 times. If you're going in to be monitor engineer for insert difficult dickhead singer here, and the whole industry knows, everyone knows that guy's fired 1,000 people. And guess what? The PM knows it too, or whoever you're dealing with, because they've been through this 1,000 times. That's when you can go in and essentially, again, if you feel like you can have this sort of banter with them, but even if you don't know if you can, you need to bring it up. If you know what you're going into and it's kind of ugly, just go ahead and be like, look,
go for it.
No, there's some hazard pay that goes along with this. Or if you're with an artist that they sound check 3 hours every day, they're notorious for doing 8 months of promo and rehearsing every single day with no break. Know all of those things, because someone's going to be hard pressed to look at you and not be like, I know you're right. And that might be an extra $1,000. That might be an extra $2,000. That might be an extra something, Totally. So it's like, no, or if you're, again, let's go on down a ladder. Let's say you're some rock band. You do 6 shows a week every week for 2 months. Kind of maybe mention that in there. Get an extra $250 a week out of it. Something like that.
Totally.
Or at least try.
Yeah.
And I'll say this, and I'll shut up. If you know what you're looking at going into a gig, like, oh man, this is a tough one, and you don't push, and I don't mean be pushy, but you don't ask for what you're worth, and you don't get it the first day it starts coming down your way, you're just like, oh, what have I done?
What did I do?
You got no one to be mad at but yourself.
I know. That's exactly right. That's totally right.
So know all the extraneous things that go along with it.
Yeah. My favorite story is, for me, in regards to money, is so I mix monitors for Courtney Love. Oh. And actually, you know what? I love her when she's not using drugs. She's like, we have a good relationship. We're like, hugging, and I don't think that I'm telling anything out of school, but
no.
What was funny was there was a period where her management was calling me to do one-offs, and I had just had it, and literally I was like, fuck this. And anytime that it showed their management showed up on my phone, I just was like, pfft. And I'm like, I am not taking this call, no way.
Right.
So eventually I think he figured it out, and he started calling me from other numbers to get me to answer. Right. So
that's great.
So finally I pick up the phone, and he goes, don't hang up. It's Courtney Love's manager. And I'm like, all right. I go, what's up? And he goes, Courtney's doing Music Midtown. And she says that she won't do the show unless you are there. And so immediately in my brain, I went, she's being offered a big payday, and for whatever reason, she is using me as a pawn, and basically saying to him that she's not going to do the show unless I go there. And so I'm immediately going, okay, it's time to ask for a shitload of money. You know what I mean?
That's your moment.
Yeah.
Shoot your shot right then and there.
Yeah. But what's hilarious about this story is that I went a step further. I said, it's because I didn't want to do it. Like I kind of was at a point where I'm like, there is not enough money. There's not enough money. Like, even if you offered me, $200,000, I'd be like, I don't know, man. That was what was. I mean, that's not true. But what was in my head, that's kind of what I was feeling. So I went a step further. I said, listen. I said, here's how it's going to go down. I go, you are going to fly me from Dallas to Atlanta, first class. I'm going to step off the plane and walk to the curb. I'm going to meet a guy who's going to have a suitcase full of cash. And he's gonna pay me X amount of dollars. I'm not gonna tell you what it was, but it was. I asked for,
that was their moment,
double my weekly rate for a one-off, basically. So you can imagine what that is in cash.
Sure, amazing.
And I said, before I even see her, I want that in cash, and bring me a duffel bag or whatever you're gonna do. Just bring it to me, and I will go to the festival and work that day. But if that guy doesn't meet me on the curb with that cash, I'm getting right back on a plane and flying back to Dallas. And he was like, I can't do that, and I said, all right, talk to you later. Boop.
Yeah, right.
And
because good and well they can. They absolutely can.
Yeah, I know. So of course, this later on that day, he calls me back and he's like, fine. That's what we'll do. So long story short, I'll tell you the end part of it. There's a lot of other stuff that went down, but literally I got off a first class plane, walked to the car. There's a dude with a bag full of cash.
Incredible.
Hands it to me, drives me to the gig. I do the gig and I'm on stage left, and that's where the entrance to the Music Midtown stage is. She walks right by me, doesn't say anything to me. She goes out and she does the entire show. She's the headliner. She's out there for 90 minutes. Doesn't say a word to me or even look at me. And as the show is done and she's walking off stage, she walks up to me and she goes, Pooch, what are you doing here?
No. So weird. So weird.
And I went,
wow.
I go, she told her manager.
No idea.
That I had to be there, but really that's not the case. Like, she didn't give a shit really, but she told him that. And
incredible.
Anyway.
That's amazing. I don't have that story. I was just thinking, I had a thing where I was with this one major artist, and she didn't have everyone on. I think the situation was she didn't have everyone on retainer. She was having babies. She was dealing with life, and so I went on and worked for someone else. And then they suddenly started doing a few shows here or there. They put somebody in place, another name mixer, had been doing a lot longer than I have, but for whatever reason, it just didn't work. Right. So I get this phone call. Sitting at home, it was a New Year's Eve thing. It's 2 days before the gig, and it's her tour manager who's been with her forever. And he's like, yo, man, same deal. Like, look, this isn't working out. This person asked for you, which is like, what a great feeling. I'm not going to lie. You know what I mean? Good. I don't give a shit who it is.
Totally.
To be like valued like that is a great feeling.
Totally.
And, like, she wants you back, blah, 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 blah. What's it going to take? And I sat there and I didn't think about it too long. And she's a challenging person, but not a crazy person,
Right.
So I'm like, okay, I got to get on a plane, show up that day. I think I had a day of rehearsal, then the show. And I was basically quoted my weekly rate plus a little bit more, just like a touch more, And I'll never forget, the guy was like, oh, man, come on. You can't do that to me. I'm like, you called me.
You called me.
It's December 29th. The show's on the 31st, and it's like 100 inputs. And so we came to terms. I got on the plane. I made up a show file on the plane because they had changed consoles, blah, 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 blah. I got there. It wasn't the greatest show ever, but I pulled it off, got a little FaceTime with the artist. I think that was the last gig I ever did with her, to be honest, because then I continued to move on with someone else. But you do have the upper hand.
In that situation, moment. For sure. Yeah, absolutely. If someone's calling you back and saying, or if someone's calling you and saying, listen, the guy that we got is not working out, is there what's it going to cost you? Immediately that you have an upper hand in that. That's just the point that I wanted to point out. These are all things that you need to kind of learn as you're going through, and maybe these guys can learn a little something from us about that.
Well, here's one group of people. No, I do
I
it
don't know
all
what's
the time.
going on. What's going on?
I noticed that.
Yeah.
I rewatched one of ours the other day, and I'm like, am I going to puke? Am I okay? So here's a group of people that I do feel for. I mentioned that I went in with that one band one time and sat down with this thing and said, look, here's what I make, blah, 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 blah. I knew I had that relationship. I knew I could do that with them there. But and it was I literally made at least double what I had made by that little thing, that Hail Mary. But guys that come up with an act, let's say you're coming out, I see this a lot with like the LA backline guys or something, they work at wherever, SIR, center staging, blah, 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 blah. They get on with this act. Right as this act starts to get pushed by the label, the act itself is 22 years old. They're starting to get some hits. So they start working for this one number. We're going to say $1,500 a week, right? In a year's time, that artist is the biggest artist in the world. If they hire Joe Schmo, or no, not Joe Schmo, if they get rid of their whole crew and then bring in the new crew, all of that crew is now asking for $3,000 to $4,000. And guess what? That's on par. Notice how I'm not talking front of house money. I'm using someone else.
I like it.
To keep it safe. But so now suddenly guess what? That's what that position pays for that level of artist. So What I'm saying is, if you get on board early, you're kind of in a rough spot, because even if you have them double your salary, think how hard that is for somebody to come out and go, we're paying you X percentage more. That's an insane raise, yet it's still not even on par with what your replacement would make if they got. That's a tough spot to be in.
It sure is.
That's a really, and I don't have an answer for that, but I think the answer, if you had someone that you negotiated with that you were cool enough with, would be just to have that frank conversation. Be like, look, that's assuming you do well there. You know as well as I do, if I'm getting replaced with on this what is now a 17 truck tour, my replacement's going to be asking for this money. I know the artist. I know this, and that's your selling point.
Yeah.
You know? But that's an especially tough spot to be, is with the act that's rapidly rising.
Yeah, it's tough, man. I mean, you hear stories all the time. So, okay, here's an interesting one.
Hit me.
I heard about a situation where a monitor engineer had a situation at home and had to go home for a week. And during that week, his system engineer came in, and the band, for whatever reason, maybe liked what he was doing, or
thought they liked what he was doing better.
Or thought it because it was different.
Exactly. And they have no baggage with that person.
Yeah. So this is a really hard discussion, because I want to say to that system, and now that system engineer took that opportunity to say, well, I'll just keep doing it, and ended up being the mixer. This guy that went home for a family issue is now out of a job. He had to go home. Like, there was something going on at home that he had to go home for, and now he's out of a job because of that. I want to say to that system guy, like, dude, that's not your place, man. Don't, if that happens, you shouldn't be the one to say, well, yeah, of course, I'll do it. You should be the one to say, listen, I'm the system engineer. I'm here to assist so-and-so. Why don't, if you think that I'm doing a better job or whatever, that's one thing. But why don't you have him come back, and, if you still aren't happy or whatever, then, whatever, fire him and then come back at me. But not be the guy that is immediately jumping at it. And this is a really hard conversation, right? Like, I don't know what to tell. But I know that what I do know is that monitor system engineer that did that now has a reputation amongst us, amongst our peers, as a gig stealer.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, that guy is probably not going to get some work down the line, because people are going to say, well, I'm not going to hire that guy. He's going to steal my gig, as a system engineer. I'm not going to hire him as a system engineer, because I know that he is waiting in the wings to steal my job.
Yep.
So I don't know. Have you ever ran into that before? It was just something that happened a while ago, and I was like, whoa, that's trippy.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know that it hasn't happened to me, but I know, you hear those stories all the time, and so much. Who did I was mentioning? Yeah. Oh yeah. A friend of mine had a musician on a big tour. He was having to have a replacement come in, and the replacement was the sweetest guy in the world. The player liked him. He was a good dude, this and that. The guy had, I actually knew the guy that was replacing him. I know this person was wise in the sense that he saw what a great opportunity that was, just like that systems guy should have seen, to make an impression. Make an impression on who? I don't know, the artist, the production, the management. Like you will, and I have that story in my catalog of how handling things that way helped me. But in discussing this trade-off with the musician who was only going to miss like 3 shows, he's like, even though I trust this guy implicitly, you can be replaced this way.
Oh, yeah.
And you can lose your job through, injury or whatever, family, or, when it's supposed to be, hey, bro, we got you. Because a lot of times it is placebo. That person that comes in is just someone different.
Totally.
And in a touring environment can get so touchy. Even someone you're really best friends with, they have these things that kind of bug you. And suddenly those aren't there. It might be the same mix, just a different human being behind it.
Totally it.
And
totally.
then next thing you know, they're the savior. Do I think that's a cool move? Again, it depends. If you're going in it with that mindset of I'm taking his job and he's someone that you work closely with, and I don't know. I think karma, it's a bitch,
I think it is too. I mean, I literally have been in the situation a bunch of times where I have covered for somebody and had, like you said, not because I'm better engineer, but I am purely the guy that is the new guy that's sitting behind the same exact mix.
Yeah. Right.
I have I would say 4 or 5 times in my career when I've been pulled into a production office and said, hey, we were wondering if you'd like to stay. I've turned it down and walked away from it 4 or 5 times in my career and said, nope, sorry. So-and-so is a friend of mine. He's an amazing mixer. He's been your mixer for a year and doing a great fucking job. I'm just here for these 5 shows, and you know what? He's doing a great job, and literally all I'm doing is using his console file. And because of that, I've gained gigs later on with that same production manager, because that same production manager looked at that and went, wow, this dude has a lot of, respect for people and wouldn't just steal someone's job. So in the moment, in the short term, it may look like you are, screwing yourself over by not taking a job that could, be, but I'm telling you, karma's a bitch and it will come back to you. If you are the guy that says, hey, I wouldn't do that to one of my friends. And by the way, he's doing a great job. I don't know what the problem is right now, but he is, or he or she. It'll come back to you, man. I'm telling you.
It's a teeny tiny little business.
It is. It sure is. Well, that's the thing. And that's the thing that people need to realize. I think that maybe guys outside of the U.S. touring don't have an understanding of how small the U.S. touring industry is and how it's literally like one phone call away to find out about anybody that's working in this industry. And so if you have any sort of reputation of being a hard guy to work with, literally, I know I can name 2, and I'm not going to do it, but I'll tell you, there are 2 super amazing front of house guys that I know that are better than me. I will say that. They're better than me, but they aren't working. And the reason that they aren't working is because they don't get along with people.
Totally. Man, I'm sorry, I got to jump in.
Yeah.
That's such a good point. I tell people all the time, I don't know that the crop of engineers at the top, I don't know that necessarily I'll say we are the best. I know that they're all really good, but it's so many times it's these other factors that are weighing in. You know what I mean? And I remember noticing this at the bars and at the club level where I'd go somewhere and I would watch the house guy was just amazingly good. Like I knew it by sound check. Like he wasn't, obviously I'm mixing my band, he's mixing whoever. I'm like, this guy is incredible. And then by the end of the night, he's just drunk in my face and he's acting like an ass. And I'm like, oh, that's why you're here.
That's why.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I know.
So there's so many factors that go into it.
I mean, always, if someone asks me, like, what's the number one thing to help me stay in this industry? And really the phrase is, don't be a dick. That's really the deal. And
I was thinking to myself, I mentioned how you'll hear of people that are making twice as much money as what you think is fair. And you can kind of be like, oh, I should be doing this or that. This is another area where I spoke in another video about, kind of being yourself, and that, we learn from observing. Of course, we watch other people and maybe we try to do what they do, and inevitably it's not going to work for you. The same when I got into upper levels and I would hear people kind of boasting about their negotiation process or this and that. At first, I was like, well, is that really is that how you're supposed to do it? And after a while I learned, I'm like, that person's a blowhard.
Totally.
And that's not an appealing strategy to me, And so, and negotiating is the same thing, where don't go in there and suddenly you're Johnny Tycoon business mogul, or don't go in there as Mr. Tough Ass either. Cause you hear all these guys going, I told them it's either this or nothing.
Oh my God.
It's like, you can say that, but
yeah.
And what I noticed is those people that I heard talking that way, I still know them. They only work for like a couple people.
I know.
It's like, it's all talk.
I know it is.
So
it is.
Try to be a decent human. Even that doesn't mean you can't be firm.
No, absolutely. And doesn't mean you shouldn't stand up for yourself when you believe that you're worth a certain amount of money. But I'm just talking about, we are just talking about those guys. I see a level of engineers I've seen who are really good. Like, I've seen a guy and I've been like, wow, that guy's really good. But it's weird. After about 2 years of that, I don't see that guy anymore, because he's not able to get along with people, and that's a real skill to have. But anyway, we're out of time. I think this was a really interesting discussion. I hope you guys get something out of this. I know that some of you want us to tell you what we make, which, you know what? I don't think that that's right. I think that you should be talking to your peers in whatever level of this industry and kind of figuring out what your range of what you should be asking for. Because if I were to tell you what my normal range is, it may not apply to you, and that's not me, like, with my ego being like, I'm in this range, I mean, that's not what I mean. I just mean that I can't help you with, unless you're, if me and Chris were having this conversation offline and not being recorded about it, we might be talking numbers, actually.
Oh, for sure.
Because I feel like Chris and I are in kind of this peer group of people that kind of get offered the same amount of gigs, and you should be doing that too. So anyway, I hope that no one takes offense to any of that. We're just trying to help you guys to feel like you're being valued and that you're getting what you think you deserve. And the way to do that is to talk to your fellow peers and to kind of set a precedent of whatever that is, whatever the money is for that. And try to help your peers not to take a low amount, and because it really does screw up everybody else that's at your level. So having said all that, thanks a lot, guys. We'll see you soon.
See ya.